Hi, welcome to XRTV Victoria. I'm Mark Nykanen. We gratefully acknowledge that we live and work on the unceded, unsurrendered lands of the Wasanich, Lekwungen, and Willamette peoples.
We need to stop old growth logging and road building to the old growth, because road building, I think, is just as damaging as cutting the timber.
All kinds of creatures applauded Elder Bill Jones's words. This one even had a message of its own. Moments later, chainsaws alarmed the crowd. But the protesters were pretenders, wielding chainless saws to dramatize the destruction of ancient trees. Within minutes, about 300 people took the street. What are you going to do if they come to you with an injunction and threaten you with arrest?
I'm gonna get arrested. Yeah, not much else to it. I'm not leaving. Yeah, sorry to say, John Horgan, but I'm not going anywhere.
We will not back down. We will not back down. Hey.
And we won't back down in our coverage.
Hello, sir. Can we help you?
No, you just do what you're doing.
We're just having a little private conversation. Thank you.
It's a private conversation, but you're in a public space. Yeah, I'll just keep shooting.
Well, here they come. The choppers are circling overhead.
What we have seen this week are loggers who have been let into the exclusion zone, where there are no legal observers, where there are no media, and where they have been falling trees, 100-foot trees, 1 to 2 tree lengths away from people who are occupying the forest canopy to protect those ancient forests.
Others blocked roadways and were arrested, or did not block roadways and were arrested. More than 50 on this day alone. Ferry Creek, from across the water in Fort Renfrew. It looks peaceful, quiet, and it is, but just beyond its untouched slope stands the Walbrand Valley. That's where threats and violence against indigenous forest defenders exploded this week.
Back to fucking Victoria, you fucking scummy bitch.
Video in.
Get the fuck out of here.
You guys think you're smart.
We've had enough.
You and your fucking teepees.
You can fuck around Teoland. You don't fuck around with us.
Move on, man.
No, we're not. You move on.
That's when the attacker smashes the cell phone out of the hands of a young indigenous woman. Then, the sickening sounds of a violent assault as at least 3 of the loggers pile on a young indigenous man. These photos show the extent of the attack. Blood drawn. Clothes torn. We raised the question of a hate crime with the RCMP again at the KQ's barrier, where the indigenous were blocked from entering their own territory. I understand that originally at least some members of the DLT came here to look into the what reeks of a hate crime that took place in the Walbrand. So what's the status of that?
So after we received information that through the media that an assault may have occurred.
May have occurred? Did you see the video?
I did, sir. Can you please let me finish?
I will. I just want to ask a question when it jumps out at me.
No, but if you
go ahead.
please let me finish. So what we did is being in the DLT, we went to every camp and we're aware an assault may have occurred. Are the people involved? Okay. And people said that they were not, that they believed they were okay, but they weren't comfortable identifying them.
We really need to say that when we're talking about hate-motivated crimes, that we recognize it, we investigate it, and we give the support that's needed so that it doesn't happen.
Vicki Husband has pioneered the use of satellite imagery to track the devastation of BC's ancient forests.
Well, that is Vancouver Island in 2019. The yellow is logged.
Wait, all this yellow?
Yes, all that yellow is logged.
That looks like most of the island.
It is most of the island. These little green spots are all that's left of the ancient forest.
So we're talking about some very, very limited areas.
Absolutely. If we've only got 1% left of the best of these ancient forests, the big old tree forests, full of biodiversity, carbon sequestration, all of these things, so important for First Nations, for Indigenous leaders, and we can't even put that aside. We can't even defer logging on that 1%. You know, we are running off this cliff.
A lot has happened this month at Fairy Creek, where Indigenous and settler forest defenders have blockaded logging roads since July. They've been trying to save some of the last unprotected ancient trees in the entire province. Their reward? Heavily armed RCMP officers have moved to enforce an injunction against the blockaders, forcing them off the logging roads. So far, more than 100 have been arrested, and still counting.
Off the road. Move back. Back up.
Confrontations have been fierce, actions by the blockaders dramatic. Below a sign that says respect existence or expect resistance, two forest defenders locked themselves to chainsaws on a bridge. Katie George Jim, a legal observer and the niece of esteemed Pachidot elder Bill Jones, was seized by RCMP officers. So was another forest defender.
Lady, you're suffocating her.
Katie George Jim was also slammed face first into the bus behind them. Two officers bent the man backward over a log. Both forest defenders were arrested. Katie was released that afternoon.
The folks that culturally modified that tree, they were thinking about future generations. They knew not to take the whole tree. They knew that what Suzanne Simard calls the mother trees nurture the other trees around it. So you leave them. And that's the kind of thing that we need to learn how to do.
Do you get a special energy when you find yourself doing art behind the barricades?
There's an urgency to it. You want to get the work done before you can't do the work.
Connie has a two-part project for Eden Grove. It's called The Mending Ground.
And one of the components is a community art project where artists mend or darn an art sock.
The elders hiked the 4 kilometers, much of it uphill, under a heat dome on the smokiest day of summer. They found that the RCMP had reduced the kitchen and adjoining areas at Fairy Creek headquarters to rubble. An elder collapsed from the heat, caught by other marchers only feet from a police line. Dr. Stephanie Von Den rushed to the woman's side. Jackie Larkin was the elder's principal organizer.
You knew that it was going to be a challenge to climb up the hill. And personally, it was a big challenge. And it will be, even going down. So I hope that you feel some shame about the decisions that your superiors have made.
Of elders.
A BC Supreme Court judge has denied logging company Teal Jones's application to extend an injunction against the Fairy Creek blockaders. This was a victory for the forest defenders. Within hours of the late September ruling, the RCMP started leaving Fairy Creek. In the ruling, the judge said, methods of enforcement of the court's order have led to serious and substantial infringement of civil liberties, including impairment of freedom of the press to a marked degree. He also noted that the court's reputation could suffer because of the RCMP's behavior in enforcing the injunction against the blockaders. So let's take a look at that behavior through the eyes of its victims.
I was kneed in the chest so hard that it fractured my rib.
He reached down into my crotch and groped me fully.
I've met people like this before, and they were gang members, but I've never seen those people with a uniform before.
RCMP violence didn't stop with the notorious pepper spraying and beatings in late August.
That officer just punched him in the head.
And women were tossed around by men twice their size. Others say they were beaten with fists out of camera range. And we're taking a hard look at the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission, which reviews citizen claims of police misconduct. RCMP spokesperson Sergeant Christopher Manceau told XRTV Victoria over and over that the CRCC is independent.
The CRCC is completely independent of the RCMP, independent from the RCMP. It'll get investigated independently of the RCMP.
He knows, and I know that's absolute rubbish, and you don't have to be a criminologist to recognize this. Is cops investigating cops? No, that's simply not on. Having police officers work for these commissions and then call them independent and impartial is a joke.
Professor Davies says police know the chances of them being held accountable for their violence is extremely rare.
Where the climate needs to change is in the walls of our government institutions. That is not changing.
Then it was on to the legislature. More than 20 people rolled the massive round of ancient Douglas fir to the steps of the Capitol.
What conviction is
Not
she
the one that
charged?
arrested her, sir, so I don't know.
So therefore you are saying you are the judge and jury.
Moments later, Wet'suwet'en matriarch Marlene Hales stepped forward.
Can I just be responsible for Raven for the time that I'm up there and bring her back to you knowing that she's going to behave herself? She's with a matriarch of the Wet'suwet'en Nation. Could you just allow that? I promise I will just make sure that if there's 3 people you do not want up, I will make sure that I can be held responsible for those 3 people.
And what happens if they...
I will bring them right back down. They won't be a problem. They are respectful to matriarchs.
Against my better judgment, I will allow it.
I'm the elder from Manitoba. That's going to be doing the ceremony. Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
An RCMP officer took video of everyone who walked to the pipe ceremony. Other officers lined the path of the participants. The assembled chanted as they walked. Getting there was harder for some than others. Indigenous Chief Sonny Wallace, Elder Bill Jones, and Grand Elder Raymond Robinson led the march. The procession turned into what appeared to be a cathedral of towering trees. Grand Elder Robinson prepared for the pipe ceremony. Volunteers set up a table for beverages, soup, and the indigenous round bread known as bannock, which was brought out a little prematurely.
I'm going to be serving this after the ceremony. Okay, perfect.
Then the Grand Elder was ready and signaled that the cameras had to be turned off.
This is our last stand with the ancient forest. It definitely is. I thought it was 10 years ago or more, but it's now. It's really now. We all have to be on board.
Do you have any advice to young activists?
Yes, stand up and be counted. This is a climate emergency and it's your future.
I'm very much against old growth logging, and I'm very much against raw log exports. They're also committing ecocide to our life support system, and it has to stop.
We followed the kayaktivists out to a freighter where XR's Howard Breen set off an orange flare, then placed this sign against the ship's hull. That's when the RCMP showed up, announcing new regulations that would keep us farther from a vessel than ever before. We backed off very slowly while Breen hoisted the banner onto a log boom, then glued himself to the boom, a first to our knowledge. His action slowed down the loading for 3 hours and drew attention to the concerns about raw log exports. While other Extinction Rebellion activists closed down a road to the Nanaimo port, police used a chemical agent to unglue Breen, then arrested him. He was charged with mischief. A parking garage above the CIBC Bank, one of Canada's 5 biggest, and a massive investor in fossil fuels, including the world's filthiest, Alberta's tar sands. Howard Breen, Regine Klein, and Tasha Diamond in the green hat lowered a rope ladder.
Looks good, actually.
Howard heads down. This was a first for Tasha.
No, don't touch me, don't touch me. Don't look, don't look.
That's on TV, are you coming?
I was.
Yep.
I caught up with Tasha and Howard on the roof where they dropped the banner.
Here comes the cops.
We're on the roof of CIBC. If there was a crime against ecocide right now, we would not have to be here. But because of the fact that the banks have invested some $18 billion just in 2020, the reality is their recklessness and their negligence is leading to the current climate and biosphere emergency.
What I want to stress is it's the failure of action of others who are in positions of power that cause the greatest distress. It is that is the twist that is causing the anxiety to be felt to be intolerable and unendurable, because they feel helpless and they feel powerless and they feel lied to.
Cradle to grave, people are now waking up to fears of their own mortality.
Howard's own end-of-life plan has led his activism to his latest, perhaps most controversial effort yet. He's applying for Canada's Medical Assistance in Dying, MAID. Canada is one of a small number of nations that has legalized medical assistance to patients who want to end their lives. But right now, it applies only to those who suffer from serious physical ailments, not those enduring acute eco-anxiety or depression linked to the climate emergency. Howard wants to see that change. Gary Wachner is among the most prominent opponents of megadams. As an environmental activist, scientist, and author, he has paddled rivers worldwide and undertaken and reviewed numerous studies of dams.
They drain and destroy rivers, they stop water flowing, they stop fish from moving up and down in rivers. They oftentimes, flood massive amounts of habitat or cause deforestation, and they oftentimes have extreme negative impacts on local people. But the science that I particularly focus on, which has just come about in about the last 30 years, is the greenhouse gas emissions from hydropower dams and reservoirs. And so it's relatively new science, but it's becoming increasingly accepted. It's actually even a part of the IPCC's protocol, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, back in 2006. So it's been around, for 16 years. There's more and more news articles, more and more research going on about the greenhouse gas emissions that are caused by reservoir operations and hydropower.
Dr. Carter says the recently released IPCC report no longer equivocates about the cause of the climate crisis.
They made the statement that it is unequivocal that human activities are causing climate change. But much more important than that, for the first time, they made a solid connection between extreme weather events and atmospheric greenhouse gas pollution. This is the first time they've done that. So it's called attribution science, and it was a huge advance. The scientists have nailed it now. And in this report, it's definite.